So we know that growth hormone and the IGF signaling pathway is needed for other things that are valuable in the human body. We can't completely abolish it, nor would we want to, but it's such an interesting insight that there's something going on here. My takeaway with regard to IGF-1, and you can let me know if you agree with this, is that we don't want to overstimulate it, which is really what your book, The Switch, is all about, with both mTOR and IGF-1, which are connected intimately, that we don't want to overdo it. And we should be aware of which things turn these genes on and off. Interestingly, I'll mention that when I've checked my IGF-1 on a carnivore diet, which may be surprising for you, it's pretty low. It's at least one standard deviation below the mean. So the Z-score, just like people will get a DEXA scan for bone density and they'll give you a mean, and then they'll give you a Z-score, which is how many standard deviations you are above or below the mean. The Z-score that I see in my clients on a carnivore diet and myself is usually below the mean. Sometimes it's more than a standard deviation below the mean, which is quite interesting because and this is kind of, I think, what will be interesting about our conversation as it evolves today. Many people are now concerned about animal foods, overstimulating IGF-1. And I think there's some nuance here for people to know that it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So I guess I'll throw it back to you. So would you agree with those statements that we don't want to overstimulate IGF-1? It's an important thing. And we should probably have a sense of where we are on the IGF-1 curve and be checking that metric frequently.
Absolutely. There's a saying that if you can't measure something, you can't improve it. And having feedback on where numerous different levels are, whether it's blood sugar levels or IGF-1 levels, et cetera, is going to be really important in the future for people to micromanage, if you will, this switch that we talk about in my book. And you've sort of led to what the book is about, because it's very much about the balance that we need to restore of these two states of the anabolic state versus the catabolic state. And I find that these modern Western diets have basically slammed the accelerator onto growth and never takes into account that we evolve to experience famine. And some of the benefits that we get from the processes that are turned on when our body is deprived of nutrients is that it cleans out a lot of really bad things: toxic proteins, misfolded proteins, dysfunctional organelles, and the reverse of that being essentially overfed, overnutritioned, and keeping mTOR, this anabolic state of growth, turned on all the time, means that we never repair ourselves. And that, I believe, is what gives rise to these diseases of civilization: diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and Alzheimer's.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you with regard to that. And I think it's so interesting and it's so nuanced. And so what we know is that by eating all the time, by eating at all hours of the day, by snacking, by not having a time restricted feeding window, hopefully we'll get into all this, and by eating a mix of different foods all the time, we are always pressing the accelerator on mTOR and never getting enough autophagy, right? It's like the buzzword, right? Autophagy. And I like that in the book, you note that we need to have some of both. There's a brake and an accelerator in every car. You don't just get in your car and smash the brake and go anywhere, nor would we as humans. And as we see, if we don't have enough of the accelerator, we will be very short. We will have sleep problems like the Laurent dwarves. There are benefits to that, but I think what we're trying to do here is really be precise and nuanced. And just like we were considering with the indigenous people, take the best from both worlds, right? Understand how to do both in the best way that we can. I think that we can, if we can marry the two civilizations, because right now we know how to prevent infectious disease, and we have sanitation, and infant mortality is rare, and we know which foods we need to get micronutrients, and we don't experience famine very often unless we're in a very dire strait financially. And so we can avoid all the things that they died of. And if we can now avoid all the things that we are dying of, we can have the best of both worlds. And
Absolutely.
I think you're right. I think that what is killing us now is the foods we're eating and how we're eating them.